"The poor afflicted creature," said the seventh applicant, standing 3 feet from his sister and looking at him instead, "will of course require a great deal of patience. Does she understand speech at all, or must one simply be cheerful at her?" Nathaniel, 6th Duke of Denholm, put down his pen, and for the 7th time in 11 days did not say what he wished to say. Behind the applicant, Lady Emiline Denholm, 19 years old, in a good green morning gown, with a portfolio of her own drawings under her arm, because she had insisted upon bringing them, caught her brother's eye across the estate office, and raised one eyebrow to precisely the height that meant, in the language the two of them had built between them over 15 years, "This one has beaten the last one by a mile." Nathaniel's mouth twitched. He controlled it. "Thank you, Mrs. Hurst," he said. "The position is filled." "But you have not asked me." "I have heard everything necessary. Baxter will see you to the gig." When the door shut, Emiline dropped into the chair opposite him, tossed the portfolio onto the desk, and signed rapidly, with a flourish that was very nearly rude. "7, and not one of them said good morning to me." "No," Nathaniel signed back. He was slower than she was. He had always been slower. "One of them patted your head." "She patted my head." Emiline's hands were expressive to the point of eloquence. "Nathaniel, I am 19. I keep your rent book. Last winter I found £4 your steward had lost in the coal accounts, and a woman from Salisbury patted my head." "I know." "Then stop advertising." "No," said Nathaniel, aloud and in sign together. He got up and went to the window, because there were things he could not say to her face, and because it was easier to look at the wet gravel and the dripping limes than at the person he had built his whole adult life around. He had been 24 when their father died and Emiline was 9, and he had brought her home from the place in Kent where she had been sent after the fever, a house of high windows and locked corridors where she had spent 2 years and 4 months, and where she had not been taught one single word of anything. She had come back to Denholm silent, thin, and watchful, and she had stayed, and he had made the priory safe for her the way a man builds a wall thoroughly, and higher every year. And this spring she had begun, quietly, to be unhappy in it. He knew the shape of it. He had watched her stand at the gallery window when the Ashwell Assembly carriages went by on the Michaelmas Road. He had found the letter she had written to a naturalist in Devizes about the wing cases of beetles, folded and unsent, 3 times, in the same drawer. He had come upon her in the long gallery once, at dusk, signing both halves of a conversation to herself. Denholm Priory had 400 acres, and one person in it who could speak to her fluently, and he was 38 years old, and would not live forever. "Nathaniel," she had come to stand beside him. She rapped the sill to make him turn. "You are being noble at the window again. It is very tiresome." "There is one more today," he said. "A Miss Hale from London." Emiline sighed with her whole body. "And you will pretend to be Mr. Rush again." "Yes." "Because you are a coward." "Because," Nathaniel signed, "the last 3 heard the word Duke and spent the interview looking at the ceiling and calling you a tragedy, and I have decided that I would rather find out what a person is before she finds out what I am." He straightened his very plain brown coat, the one he had made in the village. "Mr. Rush is the steward. Mr. Rush is nobody. People tell the truth to nobody." Emiline looked at him for a moment, with an expression far older than 19. "One day," she signed, "you will do this to someone who deserves better." The last applicant of the day arrived at 4, on foot, in the rain, because the carrier had put her down at the lodge gates and told her the house was a step, and the step had turned out to be a mile 3/4. Nathaniel heard her before he saw her Baxter's voice in the hall, apologetic. A woman's voice, low, entirely unbothered. "No, no, it is my own fault for wearing these boots. Have you a cloth? I am about to ruin a very good floor." Then he came out into the passage and stopped. Miss Hale was in the middle of the flagged hall, hatless, her bonnet in her hand because it had given up, mud to the ankle, hair coming down on one side, perhaps 26. She was drying her hands on a rag Baxter had produced. And coming down the passage from the still room, drawn by the noise, was Emiline. Nathaniel opened his mouth to make the introduction he had made 7 times, the one that began "She does not hear," and never got the first word out. Because Miss Hale had seen Emiline, and Miss Hale had put down the rag, and Miss Hale had lifted both hands and signed, plainly, unhurriedly in the manual alphabet and then in shape. "Good morning. My name is Prudence Hale. I am very wet. Forgive me." Emiline Denholm stood absolutely still. In 15 years, Nathaniel had watched perhaps 40 people meet his sister. He had watched them shout. He had watched them mouth words at her like fish. He had watched them turn to him within 4 seconds, every single time, to ask about her, as though she were furniture in the room. He had never once watched anybody say good morning to her first. Emiline's hands came up. They were shaking a little. "You sign." "Badly," Prudence Hale signed. "And in a London way. You will laugh at me." "Where did you learn?" "My father kept a school in Ludgate. 30 boys, and for 9 years, 4 who did not hear." Her hand slowed to let the spelling land clean. "One of them, Josiah Bex, taught me more than my father ever taught him. He is a printer now in Clerkenwell, and he writes to me every month, and his spelling is better than mine." "You had a school," said Emiline. "Had." "My father died in October. The school is a warehouse now." Prudence Hale's hands paused. "That is why there is a wet woman in your hall." And then Emiline Denholm laughed. The low, unguarded laugh that Nathaniel had heard perhaps a dozen times in the whole of the last 5 years, and never in front of a stranger, and took the applicant by the wrist, and pulled her toward the fire in the small parlor, signing over her shoulder at her brother without ceremony. "Mr. Rush, tea, and a dry shawl. Do not stand in the passage looking struck." He brought the tea himself. Nobody remarked on it. For an hour he sat in the corner of his own small parlor in his plain brown coat, while the two of them talked, and he learned more in that hour than he had learned in 11 days of interviews. He learned that Prudence Hale did not raise her voice at Emiline, or slow her hands to a crawl, or look at him to check whether an answer had been correct. When she did not know a sign, she asked for it and used it 3 times in the next 10 minutes. When Emiline made a joke, she laughed at the joke, not at the fact of it. And when she wanted to know something about Emiline, she asked Emiline, and then she waited, properly waited, with her hands still and her eyes on her, for as long as it took. He learned that his sister had opinions about Dutch flower painting, which he had not known. "Mr. Rush." Prudence Hale turned to him at last, and he saw her eyes go over the brown coat, the plain cuffs, the ink on his fingers. "Forgive me, I have been shockingly rude. You are the steward here." "I am." "Then may I ask you a plain question, since I have walked 1.75 miles and have nothing left to lose by it?" "Ask." The advertisement wanted a drawing mistress and companion for a young lady. £60 a year, which is a great deal, and no reference required from the last place, which is unusual. Prudence set down her cup. 6 or 7 others have come, I should think, and gone. "Mr. Rush, what is the position actually for? Because if the Duke of Denholm wants somebody to keep his sister quiet in a back room, I will drink this tea and walk to the village tonight and be glad of the exercise. The fire cracked. Emiline, who had been watching Prudence's face and had followed perhaps half of it, looked from one of them to the other with dawning interest. Nathaniel Denholm had been asked a great many impertinent questions by a great many people who knew who he was. He had never in his life been asked a decent one by somebody who did not. "The Duke," he said carefully, "brought his sister home from a place in Kent when she was 11, and has kept her safe ever since, and has lately begun to suspect that safe and buried are the same word." "Ah," said Prudence Hale, "he does not know how to undo it." "No, men who build walls seldom do, they are so proud of the mortar." She said it briskly without malice, and turned back to Emiline and signed, and spoke aloud at the same time so that nobody in the room was left out, a courtesy Nathaniel had never seen anybody perform before. "Lady Emiline, what do you want? Not your brother, not Mr. Rush. You." Emiline sat up. "To go out," she signed, "to the assembly at Ashwell, to answer my own letters, to meet one single person in this county who is not paid to be here." Her hands were quick and fierce. "And to be angry sometimes without everybody deciding it is because of my ears." Prudence Hale nodded once, as if a bargain had been struck. "Then that is the position," she said, "and I will take it, Mr. Rush, and you may tell his grace that the terms are £60, a garret with a window and no back rooms." She stood up and put out her hand, and Nathaniel found himself shaking it. "When shall I meet the Duke?" Emiline made a sound. It might have been a cough. "He is often about the place," said Nathaniel. "You will hardly notice him." Emiline cornered him in the estate office at 10 that night with a candle, and an expression of great enjoyment. "You are going to tell her," she signed. "In a week." "You said a week about the brown coat in November, and you are still wearing it." She set the candle down. "Nathaniel, she walked 1.75 miles in the rain and asked you to your face whether you meant to keep me in a back room. What do you imagine she will do when she finds out you were the back room all along?" "Then tell her yourself." Emiline's hand stopped. That surprised him. She was never at a loss. "No," she signed at last, "because if she is told, she will be careful of you, and I have never once in my life seen anybody be uncareful with you, and I find I should like to watch it a little longer." A flicker of something wicked. "Also, she called you proud of your mortar. I intend to have that written on something." The drawing lessons began on the Monday, and Nathaniel, passing the gallery door with a ledger he did not need, stopped and did not go on. Prudence Hale had put 2 chairs at the window, and turned Emiline's own portfolio face down on the table. "No," she was saying and signing both at once. "I am not going to teach you to draw. You draw better than I ever shall. You have simply been drawing for nobody. That is a different complaint entirely." She pushed a sheet of paper across. "So we shall do something else. Draw me the thing you have never shown your brother." Nathaniel stood in the passage, with his hand on the ledger. It took Emiline 4 minutes. When it was finished, Prudence looked at it for a long time and said nothing at all, and then signed, very simply, "Thank you." He saw it that evening, because Emiline brought it to him herself and put it face up on the desk without a word. It was Marden House in Kent. Not a nightmare of it, a plan of it, exact, drawn from memory 9 years afterwards. The high windows, the corridor, the door of the room she had slept in, with a small cross marked on the floor where the light fell in the afternoon, because that had been the only clock she had. Nathaniel Denholm sat with it under the lamp for a long while. "You have never shown me this." "You could not have borne it," Emiline signed. "No, You can now, she said, because there is somebody in the house who can carry the other end of it. Her hand slowed. That is what she has done in 6 days, Nathaniel, not signs. Signs I had. She has made it so that I am not the only one holding the thing up. He folded the plan and put it in the locked drawer with their mother's letters, and sat afterwards in the dark office for the better part of an hour, and made a resolution about a brown coat that he did not keep. Denholm Priory changed in a fortnight, and it did not change gently. On the second day, Prudence Hale gathered the entire indoor staff in the servants' hall, 14 people, from Baxter down to the scullery girl, and taught them 10 signs. Good morning. Tea. Yes. No. Wait, please. Fire. Sorry. Thank you. Dinner is served. Are you well? Mrs. Pardo, the cook, objected. It isn't our place, miss. Mrs. Pardo, the young lady of this house has eaten your food twice a day for 8 years, and has never once been able to tell you what she thinks of it, said Prudence. She thinks the almond pudding is the best thing in Wiltshire. She has told me so with her hands, and I have been carrying the message about like a parcel, and it seems to me a waste of a very good cook. Mrs. Pardo learned the 10 signs. She learned 40 more by Christmas, and invented one of her own for almond pudding, and it was adopted by the whole house. On the 5th day, Prudence stopped answering Emiline's correspondence for her. But she has always. Then she has always been robbed, Prudence said. Mr. Rush, her hand is better than mine. Why on earth should a companion write her letters? The letter to the naturalist in Devizes went out on the 6th day, unfolded and unhidden, in Emiline's own hand, with 2 of her own drawings of beetle wing cases enclosed. The reply came back in 4 days, 3 sheets long, and began with an apology for the delay and an argument about her 3rd drawing, and Emiline read it twice at the breakfast table, and then went out of the room very fast so that nobody would see her face. Nathaniel found her in the orangery afterwards, with the letter against her chest. He argued with me, she signed, about the drawing. He thinks the veining is wrong, and he says so in 9 lines. Is it wrong? Yes, Emiline signed, radiant. He is quite right, and I shall tell him so, and then I shall tell him where he is wrong about the other 3. Nathaniel stood in the damp green light among the orange tubs, and understood, with a plainness that hurt, that he could have arranged this at any time in the last 5 years, and had not, and that it had taken a woman with a ruined bonnet 6 days. He was, by then, in the ridiculous position of being 3 people at once. To the county, he was the Duke of Denholm, seldom seen, said to be proud. To his household he was the master, and they had all been told, and not one of them told her, because Baxter had explained in the servants' hall that his Grace had his reasons, and Mrs. Pardo had added that it was the first interesting thing to happen at the Priory since the ice house fell in. And to Prudence Hale he was Mr. Rush the steward, who had ink on his fingers and a plain brown coat, and who could be spoken to in the estate office at 9 in the evening about drains and rents, and whether the Fold Farm tenant was cheating him, and who could be told, without any of the padding that people put around a duke, that he was wrong. She told him he was wrong about a great many things. She told him he was wrong to keep Emiline out of the dining room when there were guests. She told him he was wrong to have refused the Ashwell Assembly for 8 years running. She told him in November, with her hands flat on the estate desk, that he was wrong about Mr. Pell. He is a physician of standing. He is a man who has written to this house 4 times offering to pass a current through a girl's ears for 40 guineas, said Prudence. My father was shown that apparatus in the year 11. He came home grey and did not eat. Mr. Rush, If that letter is answered with anything but a refusal, I shall walk to Devizes and answer it myself in language you would not care to read." "It has been refused," Nathaniel said. "3 times. It was refused this morning for the 4th. Prudence stopped. "By you?" "By the Duke," he said, in fairly strong terms. "Oh," she sat back. Something in her face gentled, and he found he could not look at it directly. "Then he is better than his reputation." "He is worse than you think and better than the county thinks, and neither is very comfortable." "Mr. Rush," she was smiling now, that quick, unguarded smile, "you defend your master like a man defending a brother." "Something like that," said Nathaniel, and got up to see to the lamps. It was the lamps that undid him, in the end, the small, ordinary business of a man and a woman in a warm room at the end of a long day, week after week, going through a ledger with the rain on the glass. He had not expected it. He had expected to admire her. He had not expected to sit at that desk on the 11th of December and hear her laugh at something he said about the Fold Farm tenant and feel the whole floor of his life shift 6 inches sideways. She was not beautiful in the way the county understood the word. She was quick and warm and untidy, and she had rough hands from 10 years of chalk and firewood, and when she was thinking she pressed her thumb against her lower lip, and Nathaniel Denholm, who had been proposed to by 3 heiresses and had felt nothing whatever, found himself watching for it. On the shortest day of the year, they took Emiline into the village. It was Prudence's doing. Emiline had wanted to buy her own ribbon with her own money in her own person, and had never done it, and the 3 of them walked down through the frozen lanes and into Denholm Ashwell, and did the whole absurd small transaction in the haberdasher's shop with Emiline pointing and Prudence spelling, and the shopkeeper's wife going scarlet, and then, unexpectedly, learning to sign thank you before they left. Outside, Emiline went ahead with the parcel, walking fast in the cold, and Prudence stood in the churchyard gateway and watched her go and said, without turning her head, "She is the least pitiable person I have ever met, and this county has spent 8 years pitying her, and it is the stupidest waste in England." "Yes, Mr. Rush," now she did turn, "may I say something that will lose me my place? You have said 9 such things since October. Then a 10th will not hurt." Prudence Hale looked up at him, and her breath was white, and her nose was red with cold, and she was entirely serious. "I have been happier at Denholm than anywhere since my father died, not because of the £60, because in this house I am spoken to as though what I say has weight." She glanced away. "That is not a common experience for a schoolmaster's daughter, and I did not expect to find it from a steward in a brown coat, and I am aware that I am saying it very badly." Nathaniel stood in the churchyard gateway, with his heart going like a boy's, and every honest word in his mouth, blocked by one dishonest one. "Miss Hale." "Nathaniel." The voice came from the church porch, bright and carrying and dreadful, and belonged to Lady Marchmore of Ashwell Court, who had been his mother's dearest friend, and had buried 3 husbands and feared nothing on earth. She came down the path in furs with both hands out. "Nathaniel Denholm, 8 years. 8 years since you have shown your face at my assembly, and I am told you refuse the January one too, and I will not have it, Duke or no Duke. The county has begun to say you are ashamed of us." She kissed his cheek. "Your Grace, you are a disgrace, and I have missed you extremely." The silence beside him had a quality he had not heard since a ballroom, 11 years ago. Nathaniel turned. Prudence Hale was standing very straight with her chapped hands folded in front of her, and her face going carefully, deliberately blank, and he watched, helpless, as the last 3 months rearranged themselves behind her eyes. The interview, the brown coat, the estate office at 9 in the evening. Every unguarded thing she had said to a man she believed to be a servant like herself, about the master of the house, in the master's hearing. "Your Grace," she said. "Miss Hale." "Lady Marchmore," Prudence curtsied to her correctly. "Forgive me, I must catch Lady Emiline. She has gone on and the lane is ice." And she went at a good pace with her back very straight and did not look back once. Lady Marchmore watched her go with enormous interest. "Nathaniel," she said, "what have you done?" "I told a decent woman my name was Rush," said the Duke of Denholm, "and I let her go on believing it for 3 months, because I wanted to know how she would treat my sister when she thought nobody who mattered was looking." "And how did she treat her?" "She said good morning to her," Nathaniel said, "before she said anything to me. She has taught my cook to sign. My sister bought a ribbon today with her own money for the first time in her life." He looked down the frozen lane. "And I have just paid her for it by making her the only person in that house who did not know." Lady Marchmore, who was 72 and merciless, took his arm. "Then you had better be quick," she said, "because a woman with a back like that has already packed." She had. He found the garret door open, and the box roped, and Prudence Hale kneeling on the floorboards in her cloak, tying up a bundle of school primers with string, and Emiline standing over her signing so fast and so furiously that half of it was untranslatable. "Stop," Emiline was signing. "Stop, stop, listen, you cannot punish me for his stupidity. That is not just, you are not permitted." "Emiline." Nathaniel took one step into the room. Prudence got to her feet. "Your Grace." Her voice was perfectly level. "I shall be out of the house within the hour, and I shall not want the quarter's wage. I would ask one thing, which is that you engage somebody who signs. Not for my sake. She has had 3 months of being spoken to, and it would be cruel to take it away again, and I would rather be replaced tomorrow than have her lose it." "Miss Hale." "There is nothing to say. I am not angry that you are a duke." Her chin came up, and her voice cracked once on the next part. "I am angry that for 3 months you knew exactly what you were, and I did not, and every honest thing I said to you was said by somebody who did not know the ground she stood on. That is not a small thing, Your Grace. That is the only currency I have." Nathaniel had prepared nothing on the road up the hill, and was glad of it. "Her name was Mrs. Call," he said. Prudence stopped with the string in her hands. "She came to Denholm when Emiline was 13 on the recommendation of a bishop at £40 a year," Nathaniel said. "She was gentle with her in my presence. She read aloud to her, which is meaningless, and she smiled a great deal, and I was 26 and grateful, and I went up to London for the sessions." He made himself go on. "She locked my sister in the old schoolroom. For the quiet, she said afterwards. 4 hours, 5 hours, some days more. Emiline could not call out, and I had not yet given her enough signs to tell me. And she was 13 years old, and thought she was being punished for something, and could not find out what. I learned of it 2 years later from a laundry maid who was leaving." Behind him, Emiline had gone very still. "Since then," Nathaniel said, 7 women have come here for the post, and every one of them has been charming to me, and has looked over my sister's head as though she were a chair. And I have not been able to tell which of them was Mrs. Call. So I put on a brown coat and stood in my own hall and watched, because a person's manners to a duke tell you nothing, and their manners to a steward tell you everything." He met her eyes. "That is the reason. It is a good reason, and it does not excuse 3 months. I should have told you in the first week, and I did not, and I know precisely why I did not." "Why?" said Prudence. "Because Mr. Rush was spoken to at 9 in the evening about drains, and told he was wrong, said Nathaniel Denholm. And no one has told the Duke of Denholm he was wrong since he was 24. I liked being a man in a brown coat, Miss Hale. I liked it too much to give it up, and I told myself it was for Emiline, and it was for me. The garret was quiet, rain on the slates a long way off. Then Emiline stepped between them, took the ball of string out of Prudence's hand, and signed with great clarity so that both of them could follow. He is a fool. You are a fool. Untie the box. If you leave, I shall write you a letter every week for the rest of my life, and every one of them will be about how he is at the window being noble, and you will be sorry. Prudence Hale looked at her for a long moment. Then she began, very reluctantly, to laugh, and put her hands over her face, and sat down on the roped box. £60, she said. A garret with a window, no back rooms, and your grace, one further term. Name it. You will come to the January assembly at Ashwell Court, said Prudence, and you will bring your sister, and you will not sit her in an anteroom. 8 years is enough. They went to Ashwell Court on the 14th of January, in the Denholm carriage, with Emiline in ivory silk and her mother's garnets, and a card of dances in her glove that she had every intention of using. The room did what Nathaniel had known for 8 years that it would do. It stared. He stood inside the door with his sister's hand on his arm and felt the whole county turn, the Duke of Denholm, out at last, and on his arm the sister nobody had seen since she was a girl, and he felt Emiline's fingers tighten, and then, deliberately, loosen. Smile, she signed, one-handed low. They will report it either way. Let them report that we were enjoying ourselves. It was Mrs. Colesborough who could not help herself. An hour in, by the card tables, in the voice people use for the very deaf and the very foreign. And how does she go on? She asked Nathaniel, leaning past Emiline's shoulder. Poor afflicted thing. So sweet. Such a trial for you, your grace, and there is a place in Kent, you know, a most superior place, where they are kept beautifully and are quite happy among their own. Ma'am, said Prudence Hale, quietly, from beside them, she can see your face. She reads a great deal of what you are saying, and she is standing in front of you, and if you wish to know how she goes on, the customary method is to ask her. Mrs. Colesborough blinked. Ask her, but she cannot. Ask her, said the Duke of Denholm. There was a small, dreadful pause, and then Mrs. Colesborough turned to Emiline and said, far too loudly, How do you do, M.Y. dear? Emiline signed. Prudence spoke it plainly in her own ordinary voice, without softening a syllable. She says, very well, thank you. She says she has been at Denholm 8 years and has not been kept anywhere. She says she keeps her brother's rent book and the coal accounts, and that last winter she found £4 11 shillings that his steward had lost, and that she would be glad to look at your accounts if you have a steward you are fond of. Prudence paused. Emiline's hands were still going. She says the place in Kent is called Marden House. She says she was there for 2 years and 4 months, and was taught nothing at all, and that she would be happy to describe it to you in detail, but not at a dance. The silence spread outward from the card tables, about 15 feet. Somewhere in it, a young man with untidy fair hair and a badly tied cravat pushed through from the direction of the supper room, arrived in front of Emiline slightly out of breath, and raised both hands. He signed laboriously, in the awkward, blocky manner of a man who has learned an alphabet from a printed plate and practiced it in a mirror. Good evening. My name is Ivor Trelane. Your third drawing was wrong. The others were right. Emiline Denholm looked at his hands. Then she looked at his face. And then she laughed out loud in the middle of Lady Marchmore's assembly rooms with 200 people watching, and signed back slowly, kindly, so that he could follow "Good evening. You are a terrible speller. Sit down and let us argue." Nathaniel found he could not see very well for a moment. Lady Marchmore arrived at his elbow with 2 glasses of negus, and a look of profound satisfaction. "Mrs. Colesbarrow has gone home," she said. "She said it was a headache. Nathaniel, that young man has been writing to your sister since October about beetles, and has spent 4 months learning to speak with his hands, and his father has 3,000 a year and a very ugly house in Devizes. And if you interfere, I shall never forgive you." "I have no intention of interfering," said Nathaniel. "I have had my fill of walls." He found Prudence Hale on the terrace at midnight, where she had gone to be out of the noise. With her cloak over the ivory-colored gown Lady Marchmore had bullied her into, and her breath white in the frost. "They will talk about tonight for 10 years, she said. "They will. And in 9 of them she will simply be Lady Emiline, who keeps the accounts and argues about beetles, and nobody will remember that they were ever astonished." Prudence smiled into the dark. "That is how it goes. My father used to say the whole battle is the first evening." "Miss Hale," Nathaniel set down his glass on the balustrade. "In December, in the churchyard, you began to say something to a man in a brown coat, and Lady Marchmore interrupted you." Prudence went still. "I remember." "He would like to hear the end of it," said Nathaniel. "And then he would like to say his own part, which he has been rehearsing since the 11th of that month, and has entirely failed to improve." "Your Grace." "Nathaniel, if you please. It is my name, and you are the only person who has never used it." She turned to face him. The frost had got into her voice. "Then hear the plain version," Prudence said, "because I am too tired for the pretty one. I fell in love with a steward in a brown coat who listened to me, and a duke cannot marry a schoolmaster's daughter with rough hands and no fortune, and if he tries, every woman in that room will say she came here for £60 and helped herself to a title, and they will say it in front of Emiline, and they will say it for 30 years. Her eyes were bright and furious. I will not have her pay for me. She has paid for everybody's comfort her whole life." "Emiline," said Nathaniel, "was asked her opinion of the matter 3 weeks ago, because I have learned to ask her things." Prudence stopped. "You did not." She said, and I quote her hands exactly, "At last, you have been unbearable since November." He took Prudence's cold, chapped, capable hands in both of his own. "As to the county, they will say it for 1 season. Let them. I have sat in that house for 15 years being careful of what people would say, and it made a wall, and my sister lived behind it, and a woman with a ruined bonnet walked 1.75 miles in the rain, and took it down in 6 days." His voice was not steady either by then. "Marry me. Not to teach her. She has outgrown teaching. She will be arguing with a naturalist in Devizes by Michaelmas. Marry me because there is 1 chair in the estate office at 9 in the evening that I cannot look at any more when it is empty." Prudence Hale said something that was not words at all, and then she said yes, and then she said it again in sign, which was how Emiline learned of it half an hour later, from the terrace doorway, in the frost, with her card of dances entirely used up. They were married at Denholm in April. The Denholm school opened the following spring in the old tithe barn, with Josiah Becks the printer of Clerkenwell as its first master, and a duchess, who did the accounts, and taught the alphabet 3 mornings a week, and 11 pupils in the first year who did not hear, and 34 by the 5th. Every servant in the priory could hold a conversation by the end of it. Mrs. Pardoe's sign for almond pudding entered the language of the house permanently, and was still in use 40 years later, when nobody could remember where it had come from. Lady Emiline Denholm married Mr. Ivor Trelane in the autumn of the following year, and moved 11 miles to the very ugly house in Devizes, and published, in her own name, 4 plates of beetle wing cases that were argued about by better men than her husband for a decade. And on winter evenings at Denholm Priory, the lamps were lit in the estate office at 9 o'clock, and the Duke of Denholm sat over the rent book opposite his wife, and was told at regular intervals that he was wrong. He had, he told her once, spent 38 years learning that a man's rank tells you nothing about him, and had needed a wet woman in a flagged hall to teach him what does. And what does, Prudence said. Who he greets first, said Nathaniel, and put out the lamp.